so that we can get through this agenda tonight. So I will call to order the budget meeting of Tuesday, May 12th. And I would ask Tracy to take roll, please.
Good evening. Kathy Clark. Don Clark.
Here.
Kevin Dial.
Here.
Kim Freeman.
Here.
J.D. Gillis.
Here.
Roland Herrera.
Nope, I heard him.
I see him. Okay.
Okay.
Dan Kohler.
Virtually here.
Marlene Parsons.
Here.
Ali Rosuli.
Rasuli, yes, here.
Rasuli, thank you. Laura Reed.
Here.
Francisco Saldivar.
Here.
Julia Sargent.
Here.
Elizabeth Smith.
Here.
Jonathan Thompson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. So tonight we have no one that wanted to come on Zoom to do public testimony, but I would ask Kim to speak on behalf of the West Keizer Neighborhood Association, and then we can read the request from Keizer United, and that you received on a separate email. Those were the requests. So Kim, I know that they're requesting, I'm not sure if it's 550 or 600, but you want to let us know how they're doing, please? You're muted, Kim.
Sorry, I was trying to pull up their request, and I believe they asked, I think, for $600. Correct me, Tim, if I'm incorrect.
Asked for 550, but we rounded up to 600 as our normal process.
Okay. So I know with West Keizer, they get the word out by having yard signs, and each of the board of directors has signs that they put out in their neighborhood. They also have a couple, probably more than a couple, but the information boxes that they put the West Keizer neighborhood brochure in. I know they communicate via email. They have a Facebook page, so I know that some of those funds are for renewal of their domain name. During our monthly meetings, there are copies of the minutes and agendas and any other documents that they have available for handouts for all the attendees.
Oh, we lost your sound, Kim. Did everybody lose Kim's sound? Kim, we can't hear you. We lost your sound.
Div group.
There we go. There we go. Thank
They
you.
meet the second Thursday at the Civic Center. Again, they have not been meeting due to COVID-19, and they will be off for the summer, and we'll resume our meetings in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to have any questions for Kim or anything about the neighborhood associations? So I know, Laura, we can't really hear you, but were you able to get a hold of the Southeast Keizer Neighborhood Association today? She's going to type. No, you did not. Are you typing? Oh, 1 minute? Okay. Okay.
My request, just from the finance standpoint, is given the COVID-19 situation, they haven't had a lot of meetings recently, but they have requested funds in the past, and I respect the neighborhood associations by keeping the dollar amount in at the same amount that we had last year. So that would just be my personal request as the finance department. Thank you.
And did Gubser put in a request also, Tim?
Yes, they did.
Okay, thank you.
$100.
I'm sorry, how much?
They're requesting $500.
Okay, 500, thank you.
I would like to also add on behalf of all of the neighborhood associations, they are all very frugal with what they use the money for. The majority of their expenses include signage, newsletter, internet type of stuff. They're taking the funds that we give them and really leverage them as much as they possibly can. So as far as the investment the city puts into the neighborhood associations, I do believe it goes a long way.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else have anything to say, right, for public testimony? Okay, I don't see anything. Okay, so we will go on to budget presentation and deliberation. The first topic tonight is we're going to discuss the general service fund, and that is going to be Tim, and he's going to talk about non-departmental resources. Go ahead, Mr. Wood.
So while you folks are going to page 138, I just want to express my gratitude and thanks to all of you, the Budget Committee. In my wildest dreams did I ever think we would be doing the budget meetings via Zoom, doing this remotely. This adds a whole new level of complexity. I appreciate your patience and willingness to embrace a process that is at times chaotic and wild and not 100% on all the time. So for that, I thank you. I'd also like to thank the department head group. This budget isn't just my document, it's all of our document. And it takes a lot of hands to put it all together. And not just the department head group, but also all the city staff that have input. And this is quite a timely process that takes several months to put together. It is true that I don't typically start putting a lot of energy into it until after the long range planning meeting, but we do start work, as soon as January. For that matter, I actually have staff starting to work on the 21-22 budget now, so it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. So with that, as we move into the general fund, the general services, this is our most restricted fund. This is primarily supported by property taxes and franchise fees. This is the one where we don't really have a lot of influence on the revenues. We can't go out and raise our property taxes due to the limitations that have been passed through state law. Franchise fees are the same way. The biggest impact on our general fund is city growth. With limited city growth that we've been experiencing in the last couple of years, it does have a major impact on increases that we see in our resources, which then impact our ability to provide services. The General Services Fund is the fund that is kind of the junk drawer for the city. It has all of the expenses that aren't specifically restricted to somewhere else. So you're going to see within this fund, we have the police department, which makes up the vast majority of the General Services Fund. We also have community development. We also have municipal court. And then we have, I guess, the big catch-all of the non-departmental requirements. And we're going to start going through those. This fund is going to be somewhat impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. You're going to see some timing differences in municipal court, and we might actually see an increase in people not paying citations at all when we get there. We're also going to see, it's kind of hard to figure out what we're going to see as far as franchise fees. With more people home, they might be streaming more devices at home and subscribe to Comcast, or they may not.
They can go to KeiserTV.live.
Or they may subscribe and not be able to pay their bill ultimately, which will mean that the city won't see that revenue source as strong. We've tried to put together a budget for the general services that is reasonable based on what we think is going to happen. We're going to have to keep track of it, monitor it as we see the revenue sources come in. Some of the revenue sources we see monthly, some of them we see quarterly. That adds a whole another complexity of not knowing for 3 to 4 months what the resources are going to look like. But like I say, we've tried to put together something that is reasonable, not a doomsday, but also not super rosy. We're trying to take the conservative route as much as we can. The question is, are we conservative enough, I think, at this point? So with that, moving to page 138, as I indicated, the General Service Fund is primarily supported with property taxes. Historically, like we talked about at the long-range planning meeting, we budgeted about a 4% increase. During 1920, the increase came in at about 3.3%. So that was a fairly significant slowdown that we've experienced. Going forward, for this budget, we're looking at about a 3% increase. The other piece that we're also looking at is the prior year taxes, and that's collections of stuff that has been assessed in previous years that are just now, people are just now settling up on. So that's kind of the past dues of the property tax world. If you notice in 1819, we had a fairly large pickup. That was because there was some litigation that got settled with, I believe it was Comcast at the time. So we got about $100,000 more than what we had anticipated that year. This year, for 1920, there is some litigation out there. We haven't seen the county take a reserve. If they know that there's a potential liability for property taxes, if someone is challenging their assessment, they have the right to withhold from all of the cities and other jurisdictions a percentage, their fair share of that, until the litigation gets settled. We haven't seen that happen yet, but the county still may end up doing that over the next several months. So prior year taxes, I think they're probably going to be about even with what our historical experience has been. Moving on to line 6, our sales tax number. The city does have one sales tax that I'm not supposed to name specifically, but at this point we're anticipating that it's going to be relatively flat with the current year's projected amounts. To be honest, this is significantly more dollars than I originally anticipated. Back in the day, I was thinking we would be much closer to the $100,000 mark. So I guess it just keeps going up in smoke, I guess. So with that, moving on to the franchise fees. This is unfortunately not a super great story either. Again, this is these franchise fees that we have make up a significant portion. And a lot of those, the increases we've seen have been driven off of growth in the city. As we look into the future with somewhat limited growth opportunities, we're really going to have to retract what our projections are. With the electric franchise and natural gas franchise, those are also impacted by the weather. We've had some fairly mild winters, and last summer was fairly mild as well. With that, people aren't using their heaters or their air conditioning as much. So we're seeing somewhat of a downward trend, although I do anticipate that probably will pick up. There's a question of why isn't there state revenue sharing projected dollars for 1920? I actually reclassified it this year. In previous years, we had a separate department set up to track the revenue sharing. It was somewhat different than what a lot of the other cities had done. So I had moved it into this budget for this year and going forward, just to have a consolidated intergovernmental area. So that's the answer for that one. It makes my life a little bit easier. I don't have to do an additional budget just for the revenue sharing. The other benefit for that is we're able to consolidate all of the police operations expenses into one budget as opposed to having multiple ones that we have to look across. So simplicity's sake, I'm trying to make this a little easier for us going forward. As we look at the franchise fees, cable and telephone continue to decrease every year. With those, people are just finding cheaper alternatives. They're cutting the cord, going to satellite, and going to cell phones rather than keeping their landline cable lines. So the question there is really, are we reducing our estimates enough going forward? At some point, those will bottom out. Where that bottom is, I'm not quite sure yet. So we're going to continue to look down. Sanitation franchise fees, we're expecting those flat. During the last several years, we've had some rate increases that have impacted us and increased our franchise fees there. But I don't anticipate that we'll see much in the near future as far as increases in sanitation rates. So that's really the story with the franchise fees. As we move to the intergovernmental revenues, this includes cigarette tax, liquor type of taxes. These have been increasing quite a bit. I think we may actually blow through our projected numbers for 1920 for liquor tax, and also on the revenue sharing as we pass by that old budget that we don't need to really address. We're probably going to blow through that one as well. as of today, our liquor tax was up about 13% from last year. So that's a pretty significant pickup. Cigarette tax continues to decrease, so we have not hit a bottom yet on that one either. In the miscellaneous revenues, we have a little bit of a wild card here with the stadium. There's been a lot of news recently about the minor league baseball closing the stadium. Also the question of whether there's actually going to be a baseball season at all this year. We're going to have to keep an eye on that one. At this point, the stadium still thinks they're going to have some revenue, just not sure how much. They've actually benefited from having a hamburger chain that rents out their parking lot, and in turn the city benefits from that arrangement as well. So we're still seeing some revenue flow through. How much is yet to be determined, and it's really going to be based upon if they can have a season at all and whether minor league baseball continues in Keizer, which I certainly hope it does, but it's out of our control. So those are the majority of the resources that we have. Not a lot of those we have a lot of ability to impact. Moving to page 139, you can see that we have, this is where we're seeing the transfer in from the Police Services Fund. For the year, we're expecting to transfer in $693,000. And again, this is to provide support for 5 officers, to equip them, provide vehicles, that type of thing. So we're seeing about a 6% increase. The primary reason is a lot of the officers, just the salaries alone, when you factor in the cost of living increase and a step increase, that equates to about 7.5% roughly. So we're shaving a little bit off in the materials and services area, but still it's an expensive process. So that's really covers the non-departmental resources. Is there any additional questions at this point?
And Tim, did you answer JD's question? Why isn't there a state revenue sharing project dollar for 1920? Did you answer that
Yes,
question?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
And Francisco has a question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, see, the question is the majority of the stadium fees will be collected after their season. So will you be reporting when? I guess my question is we track them monthly. They remit to us monthly. So we'll be able to see as they go through time really what's happening. And I can definitely put in a process in place to communicate back our revenue streams as we go through time. And I actually think that would be a good idea as far as transparency goes.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, I see that Jonathan Thompson has his hand raised.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Hey, Tim, just to further discussion on that stadium rent piece, if minor league baseball does go through with their ridiculous plan and we lose baseball, I assume we would lose the stadium rent, but will we also incur other costs? Are we going to have to keep that up, or what happens then?
That's a good question. Somewhat up in the air as far as the major expenses. I would assume we would have to do some upkeep to that just to keep it up and running and do whatever we're going to do with it. I don't have a good answer for you. I know we would classify it as government property, so we wouldn't be paying property taxes, that kind of a thing on it. So those are the big expenses that we couldn't necessarily get out of. As far as the major upkeep stuff, yeah, that'll be another game changer for us for sure.
Okay, Tim, there's a question from Francisco on the chat box.
Do you anticipate loss in tax payments due to the economic downturn? Not a lot. We would have to see a lot of residential foreclosures. I think at this point, if the current situation goes on for several more months, we may see an increased risk of that. But the other thing is, even if there is foreclosures, the banks are still on the hook for the property taxes. So it wouldn't necessarily be that we would lose it. It might just be we might not get it this year. It may go into a future year. So I don't think we would necessarily lose revenue. We would just have a different timing of when we receive it.
Also, the difference between our assessed valuation and our market valuation is pretty significant, or our real property valuation is pretty significant. So the values of homes assessed, would have to decrease significantly before we saw an actual downturn in property tax rates. So I think we're good for a while.
Yeah, based on what I've seen, I think we would need about a 40% decrease in property values overall before we would start to really have that impact of compression as far as the market value and the assessed value conflicting.
Thank you. I guess the point of it, or what I was focusing more on, is people who don't pay their taxes. So that'd be individuals who don't have a bank and they own their home and then they're pay their taxes directly. I don't know what percentage of that exists in Keizer or not, but I know in some places that's a larger percentage, like, for counties and stuff where there's people that own. Bank doesn't own a property, individuals own property, and then they elect not to pay their taxes.
I haven't typically seen a lot of that in Keizer. Good question. I don't have a good answer for you. At the end of the day, if they didn't pay their property taxes, after a certain number of years, the county would start the foreclosure.
It's 3 years.
Right, but they have 3 years to go, so you can go 3 years without receiving any income, and then they have that process, and even after that, I think before the fourth year, they can pay a portion to save. In certain counties in the state, that is a larger problem, where people take advantage of that, where they don't pay their taxes for 3 years, and then what they end up paying is less, and even with the penalties, they don't have to pay like 1 year, so it ends up causing issues for certain places. I didn't know how that impacted here. Clearly, it doesn't seem like it's an issue, so we're good.
We typically factor about 5 to 6% an uncollectible amount, and that typically would probably pick up that amount. And that also factors in the early payment discount that folks receive if they pay it all in October, November. So historically, I would say we have not seen a lot of that happen, but it is something that I'll definitely keep an eye out for sure.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Facebook Live. Looks like we have a Facebook Live message. The governor is asking state government departments to forecast 17% budget cuts. Does this affect the city of Keizer?
This would not affect the city of Keizer. I think we touched upon this a little bit yesterday. A lot of the areas where you're seeing this is some of the discretionary fund sources. So if there's any kind of a sales tax, that kind of a thing that they're basing their revenues off of. So actually, let me step back. The state is primarily based off of income tax. So to the extent that folks are not working right now, they're going to see decreased revenues next year that they're going to have to deal with. The city is not based off of income tax. We're based off of property taxes primarily. So we're not going to be as impacted as the state would be with people not working at this time. And again, if we get into the major housing foreclosures, that's going to be a different deal altogether.
Thank you, Tim. Do I have any other questions on the non-departmental resources report? Okay, seeing none, Tim, we'll move on to the non-departmental requirements.
Okay, the non-departmental requirements, this is the junk drawer of junk drawers for the city. This is where everything goes that we don't quite know what else to do with. We've tried to put this together on a consistent basis with the previous years for the things that we know about. Not a lot of changes going on here. One thing that I would like to identify for you is that in the past, we've included some of the support that we provided to the Chamber of Commerce here. I have moved all of that to the Community Center Fund because it truly is more of a tourist type of tourist-related cost for the city. We do marketing there through the community center as well, so that seems to be the more appropriate place to include it. The other item of note is the after-school programs. They did not want the funding that we allocated for 1920, and they did not request any additional allocation for 2021. So I think they're going through a little bit of a reorganization right now. May come back to us in the future once things settle out for them. The other item I'd like to highlight is line 33. We're actually going to be paying off an interfund loan next year. So that's always kind of exciting to get some of that stuff, at least for us accountants, it's exciting to get that off the books. Then line 34 is the support that the general fund provides to the park services. And we're given the direction of at least 2.5% of the general fund revenues be dedicated. And this year we're giving 3%. The difference is roughly $20,000 to $30,000 that we're paying more than what our specific requirement is. But we're trying to maintain the support we are giving to the park services. I think that is the highlights. If there's any additional questions.
Do we have any questions for Tim? Kathy, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did get a question from somebody about the neighborhood associations. And so just to be clear here, irregardless if they got paperwork put in because of their history of doing ongoing work, and they've all, I believe, have come to the City Council with their annual reports and asked for recognition for an additional year. I think that is probably the basis for going ahead and making sure they're all funded. We know that they, as Tim said, they do a magnificent job making every dollar count, but they also really reflect their individual neighborhoods and try very hard to reach out to people, get them connected, do projects together, and so forth. But I just wanted to make sure that people know that all three of them are in here, and that's part of the recommendation unless anybody changes it. So I do have a question regarding that, though. We did put in $600 for the West Keizer Neighborhood Association. They asked $550. I'm we know that if they need it, they'll use it, and if they don't, it'll be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Anyone else have any questions on this fund? Tim, we did move the Keizer Chamber support to a different fund. Is that correct? We moved it to the community center?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, could we speak on the line 22 and why we doubled that amount? Madam Mayor may want to speak on that.
Sure. For line 22, the city has entered into a contractual arrangement with the region here, and that was the amount that we agreed to contribute. I think the mayor could probably speak a lot more to it than I ever could. So,
thank you, Tim. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is for the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. You recall about 3 or 4 years ago, we began a work called the Mid-Willamette Homeless Initiative. As the City of Keizer, the City of Salem, Marion County, and Polk County took a very hard and comprehensive look at how people in our community who were homeless and had housing needs and other associated needs, how those needs were met, not met, defined, understood. Through that came the strategic plan, and the City of Keizer contributed $5,000 a year toward the staff person that oversaw the implementation of that plan. One of the issues in that plan was to reestablish our continuum of care. This is a federally recognized designation and pulls Marion County and Polk County out of what was called the remainder of state. So now we have a federally recognized continuum of care that is applying for funds that will much better serve the specific needs and their increasing needs of people in our community who are homeless and housing insecure. So when we were looking at the funding necessary to sustain the work as we get set up to apply for and receive federal funds, they used the formula for the Council of Governments membership as the basis and then adjusted up and down for the members who are signers on the intergovernmental agreement for the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, which became our new name as the Continuum. So the $10,000 is more. We currently have 3 consultants working with the Continuum to help not only navigate the federal applications for funds, but tremendous work is being done right now in our community as organizations work to provide for the needs of people, especially during the pandemic. And we're seeing the payoff for the incredible collaboration that has been built over the last 4 years. So then when this hit, everybody knew everybody, and they were able to work together to meet needs. So that is the reason that we are going to be moving ahead, or the recommendation is for $10,000. It's based on formula that we are the 2nd largest city in Marion County. Some of the smaller cities in Polk County, such as Monmouth and Independence, are continuing at the $5,000 level. We have also added the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Salem Keizer School District as paying members that are helping support the staffing and the work going forward for the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. At $10,000 for what we hope will bring in far north of the 1 million that we have traditionally, or under 1 million that we've been receiving from the HUD, that we will be able to eventually have enough administrative funds from that to help with staff. But until that time, we want 100% of the HUD funds to go, and all of this will go into the administrative support for the jurisdictions and the nonprofits applying for funds. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Kathy, could you please explain HUD?
Housing and Urban Development is a federal, the federal offices that distribute through one of their programs, multiple programs actually, for housing and homelessness support.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Do you have any more questions for Kathy? I'm not seeing any in the chat. These are kind of different ones here.
Madam Chair, we have a couple of questions that we didn't get to on the chat area.
That's what I was looking at right now. For Tim, do the funds for the neighborhood associations roll over?
No, they do not.
Okay. So they're given their money on when they request it, like I need 150 for signs, you just give them 150? Is that the way it works? You control a bank account?
That is correct.
Okay.
We do it on a reimbursement basis, but we also have an agreement set up with a couple of the printers around here, so the neighborhood associations can go directly to the printers, and the printers just bill the city directly. So it's
Okay,
really
thank you. And another Facebook Live comment was just saying, so much fun to watch as usual. Staff is so well prepared as you are. Thank you for that compliment. Also, Councilor Freeman wants to talk about line 19. Councilor Freeman?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Chair Parsons. And Kathy, I just wanted to make sure that our $10,000 for the homeless initiative is to pay staffing costs. I just want to make sure I'm clear, and I want to make sure that everyone understands what our funds are being utilized for. I mean, you talked about it in a roundabout way, but I never really heard that it's for staffing costs.
So this is the administrative. Thank you. That's a very good question. So all of the signers at this point, we are helping provide the staffing with 3 consultants, and then the overhead for this to be housed at the Council of Governments, while we work through the process with our nonprofits and other service providers to apply for funds from the federal government through the not only HUD but also other programs. So these funds are specifically to keep the lights on, the doors open, or in this case, the Zoom activated, to be able to get staffing, staff support. And the contractors, that would be Janet Carlson, Jan Calvin, and Carla Munns, who are all working on a part-time contractual basis to provide services as we get the continuum of care up and running and standing on its own 2 feet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, Councilor Freeman?
Okay, so yeah, I would like to have some discussion around Keizer United. They have requested $2,000, and in looking at what they have spent the money on in this last fiscal, it was to support Jerry and Peggy Moore, the community garden, the LAC, the Latino Action Committee, which helps with the graduation. And I believe some money went to Kennedy Elementary. So I just have honestly never really understood Keizer United. And I feel that these funds are probably not funds that the city would normally contribute to these organizations, not that they're not valid organizations and not that they don't need support. And so I just, if the mayor can give us some information. I know Councilor Herrera attends the Keizer United meetings. I know the group has grown over this last year. I know Meredith Mooney is doing a great job. I am just more concerned that we're using taxpayer dollars to fund some of these organizations that would not receive city funding in the first place. Thank you.
So to answer some of the questions, yes, Meredith Mooney is the executive or the president of the Keizer United Board, and they have grown this from just a handful of people to over 20 nonprofit organizations that are meeting together on a regular basis to collaborate, discover what each other's needs are, to help each other out in serving our community in a very broad-based fashion. So to the point regarding the community garden, that is something we have funded through our Parks Board. They've applied for grants through the City Parks Board with the, let's see, who are the other ones?
It's LAC Kennedy, I believe.
Okay, so Latino Action, the City of Keizer has supported them by providing the meeting space free of charge. So these are organizations that have partnered with our community and with the city. And so these are ones that have been recommended by the board of Keizer United for funding when they believe that they would be able to provide a community-wide benefit. So if there are some that we have some questions about or what the criteria are for allocating those funds, I think that would be a very appropriate question to ask. And if they have criteria written out, I don't have it handy. I'm not the liaison, but I do know that they're quite judicious about meeting needs when they're asked and finding out what they're going to be used for and why. They were also very careful, and it was a really good move when they moved from using city funds to provide for the lunches for people and having local businesses partner to provide for that. Now, going forward for a while, that probably won't be the case. We'll be all trying to support our local businesses the other way, who have been so generous to support our nonprofits. But in that same regard, I believe that the relationships that they have built will allow the flow of charity, for the lack of a better word, to be able to flow both ways. But I think that it's a question well asked that we look at what the criteria are for those contributions. But I believe in general, it is what is going to have a community-wide benefit.
Thank you,
I hope I
Madam
answered your question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That answered the question. Councilor Freeman? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions on the non-departmental requirements? Okay, seeing none, we will move to community development, and I believe that is our short timer, Mr. Nate Brown.
Short timer who's long in the tooth. And I'm still trying to process the fact that I live in the junk drawer. So, basically, the Community Development Fund is as it was last year. You can see that there are no changes. We ebb and flow with the different projects that come about. And I think, honestly, the only thing that I would ask or admonish the budget committee is to think about our code enforcement program. Right now, we have one code enforcement officer who provides assistance to not only the Keizer development code issues such as tall grass and weeds and junk vehicles and that sort of thing, is also providing significant backup work for the police department in things such as parking, homeless issues, graffiti abatement, and those kinds of things. So I think I would urge everybody to be thinking pretty hard about how we want to move forward with our code enforcement. Right now, we have both Ben and Megan spend a significant portion of their time supporting the police department and with the kinds of things that are that I just identified for Ben. Megan provides that administrative support by taking the calls, filling out the reports, making sure that Ben has full access to everything that he does. So at some point, as we continue to mature as a city, these issues are going to be ongoing, and I think at some point the city should take a hard look about how we administer our code enforcement. There's a lot of things that we don't do. We don't do housing inspections that other jurisdictions do. We don't do any of the proactive stuff that many of the other jurisdictions do. So that is my admonition for y'all. And I think at some point there's going to have to be a hard look about how that code enforcement activity lives and breathes and does its job. So with that, I'd be happy to have any questions.
I have a question, Mr. Brown. So we got the police service fee so that we could fully staff our police department. And so why haven't we pulled Ben a little bit away from there to do more work on the other side? Does that make sense?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask that, but Ben's support was prior to the police service fee.
Right.
I think the bigger question is there an opportunity to use those resources that have been generated to back support the kinds of support that Ben is getting, or giving rather. So that one is probably more complex, and I'll let Tim or Chris or whoever
wants to field part of this.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Hey, Chair Parsons, can I speak? It's John T.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, when I first came back in 2013 in a non-committal statement, city manager told me the next hire for the city would be a police officer. I told him I suggest we should hire a code enforcement officer. There are things that are not criminal matters that we cops run across all the time that the city can do under code enforcement to increase the livability and increase the public safety in the city. So that's what Nate's talking about as far as us working with code enforcement. And I would encourage us to increase code enforcement, perhaps with another part-time or full-time employee, if the day should ever allow us to do that. There's certainly room for us to do that with inside the PD. We could feed Ben more work than we're already giving him. Nate, if I have that wrong, you need to speak up.
No, honestly, that's very well put, Chief. It's a matter of resource and resource allocation, and we all know that code enforcement contributes dramatically to the livability quality in our city, and it's kind of it will take whatever effort the city is willing to put towards it. I mean, Ben does a great job, and we constantly are responding and re-responding and going out. There are certain properties that are habitual properties, and we we go through the court process, and then it's good for a year, and then all of a sudden it starts over. But we do nothing that's proactive. We do not go looking for. We're complaint driven. We respond to the significant issues that become significant enough in the neighborhoods to engage with. But there's more that could be done.
Mr. Thompson has his hand up.
Okay, Jonathan.
Hey, Nate, don't feel bad about the junk drawer comment, because the chief's in there with you, and he has a gun. So, no, but in all seriousness, I wanted to, what you and your team did with the revitalization plan over the last year, more than that, was really amazing with the resources that you were given, the public meetings, the outreach to community groups, how you took and implemented constructive feedback. I mean, with the relatively little budget that you have and all the work that you and your team did on that, it's to be commended. So I wanted to make sure that was on the record.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's not done, but it certainly was a big step forward, and I do appreciate your comment.
Thank you, Nate. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Brown? Okay, thank you, Nate. Good job. That takes us to municipal court, and that's Mr. Wood.
Municipal court is another area that will likely be impacted by COVID-19. The most immediate impact that we're seeing is in our revenues. We started writing, or the police department started writing citations with court appearances 90 days out rather than 30 days, which has been our historical trend. So right there, we're going to see a delay as people can defer having to pay a traffic ticket for 90 days rather than just 30. And that will, I hope, will end up just being a timing issue, that once we go back to writing citations at a 30-day mark, that we'll have a catch up with a windfall of citation revenue. That may or may not come true, depending on people's ability to pay. We may see an increase in delinquent court citations. Surprisingly, probably only 25% to 30% of people actually pay their citations. So there's a large amount that we ultimately turn over to collections. So we'll have to keep our eye on that as we see what kind of trends we see as far as people continuing to pay for the citations that they have. The police department still is active out. And like I say, they've just changed the timing of when people are required to appear for court. So we'll keep our eye on that one. Past due collections continue to come in. We had a fairly good month with April. I think some of the stimulus payments that were sent out rolled around and people were able to get their driver's license back, that kind of a thing. So it's helping keep the economy moving forward for sure. As far as staffing goes, we have one person designated full-time to the court. We also have another person within the finance group that helps out quite a bit with the court every Wednesday. As far as the ongoing expenses, we are seeing an increase in interpreter use. So you're going to see a slight increase in the other contractual services. Other than that, we're just kind of keeping on with court. With that, if there's any questions, and it's the utility drawer, please.
Mayor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For those watching, I want to point out something was mentioned earlier about where Pier Court ended up. And due to some conversations earlier this year, there was a rethink on how this was going to be budgeted. It was on the other page and then transferred over. So this simplified it a great deal. I want to thank you, Mr. Wood, for looking into how those funds were being brought in. And for a while, it was Keizer United was assisting with the with receiving the grant monies. And since the city can receive grants, it looks like you worked that out. I wasn't part of the final conversation, but I see the result of it. So for folks who want to donate to or be part of supporting Pure Court, you can do so directly with the city, as I understand it, going forward. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct. Pure Court is available to us. It's an agreement between Marion County and the city. The city has outsourced the administration of Pure Court, but we're still somewhat on the hook for it all. So we do all the accounting in-house now. We will be applying for grants, that type of stuff, through the city rather than through any other third-party nonprofit type of group. So it really is a program, much like the Keizer Municipal Court. We outsource the judge. We do the same thing with Pure Court. So trying to treat all of our programs equally is what we're doing here by making the change.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for that clarification. Do we have any other questions about the municipal court? Okay, I see none, but I do have a Facebook Live comment for clarification. Keizer United is not part of the Salem Leadership Foundation. Keizer United is its own 501c3 who may collaborate with Salem Leadership Foundation to write grants. Okay, and they have staff on the board of the Keizer United. So we just wanted to get our clarification for folks. Okay, Dan, Mr. Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question. Is there a counselor that goes to Pure Court like we go to municipal court?
No, not usually. I can answer that question. No, we haven't in the past. And
Is that
Mayor,
something that we should?
that's for up to the mayor there. I would ask her.
So traditionally, Pure Court was run a little bit differently, as we just discussed with Mr. Wood. It's a little bit different because juveniles are involved. And I would want to probably have a conversation with Tim and with the director on people coming in and observing. It's a little bit different than municipal court, which is adults. So I'm going to put that question in the hopper to follow up. But thank you. It's a good question.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? You can put your hand down, Mr. Kohler. You're going to confuse me.
The only comment that I might make is that municipal court is slated to begin meeting in person again on June 24th.
Okay.
So that's when we'll see them spin back up.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Mr. City Manager. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Wood. We will move now on to police operations, and I believe that goes to Chief Teague.
Yes, ma'am. We're on pages 145 and 146. We're a big budget, but with this year, very, very small changes. 145, there's relatively no change to the bottom line as far as the money goes. There's a couple of substantial changes as far as personnel. When Jeff Coons retired as deputy chief, I hired an administrative lieutenant to fill that role. The guy that's in that administrative lieutenant position just didn't have the internal legitimacy to be a deputy chief. He may very well earn that, but so the FTE position is still filled, although with a different rank. We've also discovered a critical need for another person in property and evidence. We had 2 temporary employees, well, one part-time, one temporary, that were working there, both retired in the last month or so. We took the half-time community service officer position, married that to the 2 temporary employees to give us an FTE, another FTE in property and evidence. So those are the changes to personnel. Again, the changes to the bottom line are not very significant. I can take any questions on page 145.
Any questions for the chief on page 145? Okay, that's on the next page. We'll talk about that on the next page. We did have a question about the lack of security at the court, but there's usually a uniformed officer there, as they always have access. They're usually there testifying, and there's always a panic button that brings police immediately. So
We used to pay overtime for a cop to sit in there, and we decided that we in the administration, myself and the lieutenants, could provide that at no cost to the city. We've been doing that for 2 or 3 years.
Thank you, Chief. When you get to the next page, we do have a question about line 59.
Sure.
Right now we're on page 145, and Mayor Clark has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking at the overtime for community events, and traditionally budgeted for police to assist with both the Keizer Fest parade and the Holiday Lights parade. So I'm glad to see those still in the budget, even though it looks like the one probably isn't happening this year. But hopefully the Holiday Lights parade will occur in December. I imagine that will be some cost savings at the end of the year if we don't do the second parade. And that will just roll into our carry forward.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, Chief Teague.
Okay, page 146. This is materials and services. Again, not many changes, at least not around things that I can control. For example, you see a 66.7% increase in telephone services. I don't have much charge over that. We're talking a few $1,000s. You see a 13.3% change on line 69. That's to increase that line item by $2,000 to $17,000. That's because we're now required, like we have been for a while, but haven't been doing it, required to shoot two Keizer cartridges a year to stay certified, which is just a boondoggle for Keizer, but we've got to do it. It's $2,000 to us. At the same time, though, I decreased our vehicle maintenance from 47 to 45, saving that $2,000. Councilor Freeman asked about line 59, labor attorney. We always budget a certain amount of money for the unforeseen. This year, we have budgeted $35,000, but this year we're only likely to spend $2,000 to $3,000. Next year, we've kept it at $35,000 because we're going into bargaining with our union. Does that answer your question? Okay, very good. There's notes on lines 65 and 77 at the bottom of the page. Those are old notes. In case you read them and wondered about them, those are carryovers from last year. You can strike them. That's about $1 million there, and those are all the changes. Do I have any questions?
Yes, Chief.
Oh yeah, you asked about rain, Councilor Freeman. Rain is the, I have to get the acronym is. It's 40 years old. It's the law enforcement data system. It's the data sharing among all the agencies.
Chief, there's a question about the change in line 42, which is the wellness, sort of the difference between the actual and the budgeted, from Mr. Gillis.
Yeah, Michelle.
I'm probably better able.
Go ahead.
I'm probably better able to address that. Again, with our wellness program, we budget to allow everyone full participation. So you're seeing a little bit of with previous year, we didn't necessarily do that, but this year we did because we are making changes to our wellness plan with the hope that we can get all of the police and administrative staff in the police department to participate.
And then line 84, Councilor Kohler had a question about how many cars do we try to replace each year?
Yeah, this used to come out of revenue sharing. Tim moved it to here, and this is big money, so I've always deferred our support lieutenant, Trevor Winning, to work directly with Tim Wood, so I'm going to have to defer to Tim Wood here.
In any given year, we'll replace 2 to 4 cars. For the next year, we're looking at replacing 2 vehicles.
And then there's a question about where does the blast camp live in terms of funding?
Line 76 is blast camp. That will probably end up being $0 for this year as part of the carryover. Blast camp's been canceled.
And then there's the police academy. I'm assuming that is the Citizens Academy. Where does that live in terms of funding?
That lives in community services, it doesn't cost us very much at all, hundreds of dollars.
Hundreds. Okay, dozens of dollars. Got it. I think that answers all the questions that were typed.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone else that has any questions for the chief? I don't see any hands raised. I think we did answer all the questions in the
Mr.
chat.
Gillis has a question.
Oh, Mr. Gillis, go ahead.
Tim, you said that the police vehicles, or maybe it was Mr. Teague, said the police vehicles get replaced, or a couple of them every few years. Was the line item changed? Is that why there's not history on that line?
That is correct. The vehicles were previously accounted for in the revenue sharing fund, which is actually on page 147. We're getting rid of that fund altogether going forward. So you can kind of see the history there. For this current year, 1920, we're spending about $208,000. I believe that's 3.5 cars, roughly, somewhere in that range.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So this is John Teague again. So revenue sharing is page 147. That doesn't appear on the agenda, but I think you're going to speak to that, right, Tim? If you haven't already.
Yeah, basically, I'm just going to say we don't need to talk about it. So it's just there because we have historical information that we need to keep track of.
Please, I'm sorry, Martin, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Any other questions, Chief? Did you have anything else?
No, man.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Wood, you had anything else?
That is the end of the General Services Fund, so you could make a motion on the entire fund if you so choose.
Yes, thank you. I would entertain a motion for the General Service Funds.
Make a motion that we approve the General Service Funds as written.
Kim Freeman, second. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the General Service Fund as presented. Discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say your name and aye. Okay, nothing opposed. Thank you. That takes us now to the special purpose funds. And the first one on that is the Police Services Fund on page 148, and I believe that's Chief Teague and Tim Wood. Thank you.
Probably more me than the chief. When we established the police services fee, we did designate that we would account for it in a separate fund outside of the general fund. This is where we do that accounting for it. It's collected here, and then on an annual basis, we go through and transfer out the amount of expenditures that we believe cover the 5 officers and the amounts to equip and provide them vehicles, computers, that type of stuff. The only item of really note this year, the revenues are very consistent every month. We're going to see about $680,000. We do see a slow increase in the number of people that are applying for the age-related discount or the low.
I hear it.
Is that me? Oh, okay. For fiscal year 2021, this will be the first year that we're going to be transferring more funds out of the Police Services Fund than we're actually taking in. So as we've talked in the past, we'll have to start looking at how much of an increase and when we would like to do that. For this current year, for 2021, we are recommending no increase just in response to the COVID-19 situation, and this is one of the ways that we can provide less uncertainty to the citizens in Keizer. So with that, if there's any questions.
Madam Chair.
Oh. Thank you. Someone muted me. I'm sorry. I have a question about, this is the 5 police officers, right? This is our police service fee that we pay for every month. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor has a question.
I just have, thank you. I have a follow-up comment. some of the other things that have come up tonight, and this in particular was discussed during the council work session regarding our staffing and resources for going forward. And until the pandemic hit and we were looking at the needs of people in our community, we were looking at the long-range planning for how to make sure that the funding remains intact for these 5 positions through the fee. So that conversation has taken place. We do have a good idea of what that looks like going forward, but pressing pause this year makes a lot of sense because of the situation we're in. There's a lot of unknowns, but this is a conversation that will continue, and we'll have to look at how we are going to do this going forward. And I really appreciated the thoughtful and the well-informed discussion we had about how important this is that we have our police fully staffed and fully equipped to provide the public safety that we need. But I just want to make sure people in the community who are watching tonight know that this is something that is part of an ongoing discussion with the council and the staff on how we can best meet these needs in a cost-effective and responsible manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tim, can you also share with our citizens if they would qualify for a fee waiver, and just give just some overview? I know we've had some people come to council in past years not understanding this, and can you just give a quick update on that, please?
Sure. The most likely scenario is the age-related discount. At this point, we are providing discounts to those 70 and over. So they just need to contact the city and we can work with them to work through that process. The income discount, we are basing that off of our sewer program that is part of the city of Salem. So we're taking their income figures, and unfortunately I don't have them right in front of me, but we do have a form on the city website where folks can go and look up what the income figures are. And we try to be as generous as we possibly can as far as getting the discounts out and letting, especially the age-related ones. Once you get to that magic mark, you've made it. So,
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Ms. Freeman has a question, a hand raised.
Oh, I think she forgot to put her hand down. There, yep, that's what I thought. Okay, perfect. So I guess we'll move on to the Community Center Fund, and that would be Tracy.
Before we go any further, I think we need to vote on each fund individually.
Oh, we do? We do, Tim?
yes, that is correct. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I thought we, okay. Sorry, Tim and I discussed this and I must have misunderstood him. Okay, so on the police services, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move that the Budget Committee approve the Police Services Fund as presented.
Kim Freeman, second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the police service fee as presented. Discussion? I'm sorry?
Services fund, not fee.
I'm sorry, services fund. I'm sorry, services fund. Any discussion? Okay, those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Nay. None of it passes unanimously. Now we'll go to the community center. Tracy.
Thank you. We're on page 149. So the top portion of that, the revenue to support the community center, comes from monies received from the transient occupancy tax collected at our 2 local hotels and the community center rental fees. The rental fees for the current year end, we will probably not meet our projections this year. The center has been closed since mid-March due to the COVID-19, and we're hoping to open maybe in a couple weeks for our small groups, but not sure when we'll be able to continue for our larger events. So we did project a 25% decrease in rental revenue for this coming year. So you'll see that in the revenue portion. Currently, we have 1 full-time employee, our event center coordinator, and evenings and weekends are covered by our temporary event hosts. But based on our increased rental services for the last 5 years, we developed a new position, a full-time position that would be a community center assistant. It would cover the events in the evenings and on the weekends. We started the recruitment, but ended up suspending it due to COVID-19. So that recruitment is on hold for right now, and we have not filled that position. We'll wait until we see where the community center ends up before we open that recruitment back up. But you'll see that in the budget, the personal services line item is increased for that position, but then we have a decrease in the temporary help line item that will offset that. We'll still have to use some temporary events or hosts for our larger events. One person can't handle that, so there'll be some additional temporary help used, but not as much as we currently use. So the other increase or decrease, it's a decrease actually in line item on the capital outlay and the furnishings. This last year, we did replace all the carpeting in the center and in the hallways, and we purchased a new stage and upgraded our audio sound equipment. So in the next fiscal year, we hope to replace the large screens and some of the tables and chairs. After 11 years, some of them are seeing some pretty bad abuse. So that's about it. Up until COVID-19, the center was thriving. We were on another year for hopefully beating our revenues from the year before, but we hope to get back to that. So be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. I do have a question from Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really no question. I just would like to talk about the chamber support. I know we heard from the chamber executive director last night, Danielle Bethel, about her ask. She is asking for additional revenue. We did increase the budget item by $1,000 based on what we did last year. So from $15,000, we increased it to $16,000. I believe her total ask from the transit occupancy tax would be a total of $27,000. So I would really like to see us increase that, and I will defer to Tim if that's something that we can bring up later when we talk about potential carry forward funds that are available, or if that is something that we do based on this fund particularly and need to have further discussion about that.
My recommendation is we just address it now, since we're looking at it. So actually I really made it hard on everyone this year. Buried within here, there's actually $19,100. I didn't put it all into one line item. I kind of separated it out by what we've paid in the past and the buckets that they were in the past. So I think probably when I get back to the budget hearing in June, I'll go ahead and move those from the different buckets so we can put it all into one line item. The ask, if we wanted to do the 15% of the TOT tax, would be an additional $12,000 that we would need to increase line 32. So that would bring that line up to, $28,000. My thoughts are if the budget committee would like to move that direction, that we would just take it out of the ending fund balance. We have $68,000 there, and we could absorb that for the next year if we to do that.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So I am I guess my ask would be to increase it actually from 16,000 to 20,000. So not giving them their full ask, but increasing the amount on line 32.
Okay, we're up for discussion on this. I want to say that I actually agree with Councillor Freeman. The chamber now more than anything is working double. They've had to lay off staff and we need them right now during this COVID. I think they've proven a good of the money that we've given them. They've done really well with it. And they've totally made the money work well for the city, I think. So I will actually agree with Councillor Freeman. But I will entertain other comments, and I have Mayor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I absolutely agree that we need to increase the support for the Chamber of Commerce. The way they have produced for our businesses and our entire community through the COVID pandemic has been nothing short of stellar. And the fact that they had to lay off somebody during a time when they needed them the most is not terribly helpful for our businesses. This is definitely linked to use of our community center, because the businesses that do business in our community center are our businesses. Unlike other community centers or convention centers where it's in-house, the way we designed our community center was to make sure that our local businesses did business here. So every time that the chamber is bringing events, businesses, or helping them out, we are providing the place for that to happen, and we will continue to do so. In addition, putting together very quick turnarounds on the reopening plans for Marion County, the quick turnaround on creating a Hungry page on Facebook to promote our local businesses, and scores of phone calls to help our businesses stay open and stay hopeful. It has been nothing short of amazing. And I think that the support that they need to make sure that they have staff on board, we have some measurables we can definitely ask for. We can ask for the metrics on the businesses they've been able to help. We can ask for metrics on the people who are able to engage through Keizer's Hungry and other outreach. We can ask for metrics on their ability to connect businesses with programs in our region. And I think those would be helpful for them as well as for us to know how their work has benefited our business community and what's worked and what could be helpful going forward when we do our debrief at the end of this period of time. I'm concerned that the $4,000 may not be enough for them to bring on the staffing level that they need to be able to really come through for our businesses right now. The amount of money that the executive director, Danielle Bethel, asked for was additional, to take it up to the $27,000 level. I would like to at least find some common ground and have them come back with a refined ask for the final budget hearing in June before the city council on what that would look like to bring back that position, because they need all hands on deck right now, and I would like to know how much that would cost. If this is going to be a placeholder for right now and add $4,000 until we get that, I'm okay with that. But I would really like to know from the Chamber of Commerce, and we do have the board president here with us, what that would look like, what's it going to cost, because we need them to be producing at the maximum right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and I totally agree. Jonathan, you're up.
To answer the mayor's question, yeah, we'd be happy to get you whatever you need. So, yeah, let's connect and make sure that you have what you need moving into the city council budget meeting. But just on another note, another thing we were talking about today at the chamber is we're getting lots of calls for businesses as they're reading the retail reopening plans about needing personal protective equipment. So that's another thing that landed in our laps today that we're working with some of our state partners on to help. I don't know what we'll be able to deliver yet, but it's a new thing on our plate, so we'll take it and go. But just to hopefully keep Shannon happy, I am the chamber board president. It is an unpaid position. I like to say that my pay is tied to the mayor's pay, so whatever she gets, I get a percentage of. But we get percentage of 0, so we're good. But I just want to make it clear that this is not money that ever ends up in my pocket. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Kohler.
Thank you, Chair Parsons. Now, my understanding was when Tim was talking about the amount that the chamber actually gets, there was some coming from different funds. Is that what you said?
It's all included in this fund. It's just in different line items. The total amount that's included right now is $19,100 to fully meet their request. Well, if based on my assumption of TOT tax, it would be an additional $12,000. If you do put it at a percentage of TOT, that number can fluctuate.
So if we leave it as a percentage of the TOT, can that still be left in the budget that way, or does it have to have a definitive number to it?
I would appreciate a definitive number, just because under budget law, we are required to come in under our expenditures. I think a maximum would be the $27,000 though.
Yeah, I think realistically in any given year, we would look at the history and then make a projection out based on a 15% amount and then put that in as a fixed dollar amount.
Okay.
There are some other questions, by the way.
Yes.
That area.
Madam Chair, Mr. Gillis asked why there was an increase in line 24. It was 50%. It's not a huge dollar amount, but it was a large percentage jump.
Line 24, Tracy? Or
I can address that.
Okay.
We're actually, that's the insurance associated with adding the additional event center assistant. So you're going to see a lot of the payroll type of expenditures double just with the additional body.
And then I had a question about the huge.
I got a follow up. Sorry.
Go ahead, JD.
Is that additional headcount? Did you say that there was a pause on filling that?
That is correct. Until we see the event center come back to life, that will be a cost savings to the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, and then go ahead, Mr. Dial, with your question.
Huge jump in the attorney's office fees, 186%, which is a significant amount as well. What's the reasoning there?
I can address that one. The attorney's allocation is based off of projects. Over the last several years, we've had a significant increase in things like looking at contracts associated with the event center. As the activity has increased, the amount of attorney services that it requires is also increased. So that's the driving factor. It's based off of a 3-year average. And I think we had a couple of big years that have kind of hit us. There's things like looking at the rate structure, looking at all the contractual agreements, making sure the insurance requirements are in place. All of those kind of things the city's attorney's office gets involved with. And then additionally, during the council meetings when we have requests for waiving of fees, they're also involved at that point as well. So we've just seen an increase in activity that requires their assistance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wood. Councilor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. In listening to the comments and support of the chamber, my $4,000 addition was just really a conversation to get the ball rolling, and I really appreciate everyone's comments. I totally support the mayor's comments about getting additional information. I also know that Jonathan Thompson, as the board chair, will ensure that they are, but I have no doubt that they would not get us that information prior to the final adoption in June. So my hope is that we put the full amount of their ask in there, which is the additional $12,000 that Tim talked about, so it's even to get them close to the ask that they're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Freeman, and we can do that during the motion. All right, now, so Councilor Kohler, Mayor Clark, did you have a follow-up questions? Because your hands are still in the air.
Thank you, Chairperson. It was down, but it went back up, and I agree 100% with what Councilor Freeman just said about making that the full of their ask tonight.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments for Tracy on this fund? Mayor Clark.
Thank you. I do want to give a big shout out to Tracy and the entire staff that has made our community center so welcoming to people in our community, and also brings a lot of visitors here that enjoy Keizer hospitality. I think that the way it's run and the way people feel when they come here and when they come back and bring their friends is a real testament to the work that Tracy and the entire crew has done to help people feel welcome and comfortable and have good feelings about Keizer. So thank you very much for the work that has made this such a cornerstone of our community.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I echo that. Any other questions or comments? City Manager.
Madam Chair, we would need, if that is the direction this committee wants to go, which is to basically monetize the 15% at $12,000 and put that in there as a cap. We have a motion on that, and then a vote of this committee, and then vote on the fund as amended.
Okay, thank you, City Manager. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Councilor Freeman.
I move that we allow the chamber the 15% of the TOT, adding an additional $12,000 to line 32.
J.D. Gillis, second.
It's been moved and seconded that we put $12,000 on the chamber ask to put them up to the 15% for this fund. Discussion. City Manager, you had your hand raised. No? Mayor Clark, how about you?
Yes, I do. So
Okay.
there was two things mentioned. One was the 15% and one was the $12,000. And at this point, I'd feel really comfortable with one or the other because I think that the city manager and Mr. Wood made, if we come up with a dollar figure, then we can look at how we want to do that year by year. So I would offer a friendly amendment to that this motion be for the additional $12,000 and to save the conversation about a percentage for another time.
Does the mover, okay, does the second also agree? Okay, thank you. So we, Mr. Johnson has a question first though, before we vote to make sure we're doing this right. Shannon, where'd you go? Okay.
I'm here, thank you. I believe the mayor covered it. I think the best way is just to have a flat dollar amount, and then each year you could look to see how you want to do that, as Mr. Wood had suggested. And so the motion, as I understand it, as the friendly amendment accepted by the mover and the second, is to add 12,000 to that line. And so if that motion is successful, then you would have another final motion to adopt it as amended.
Okay, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded that we add $12,000 by the mover and the second. So see, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Say nay. I'm sorry? Did we have an opposed? Okay, thank you. That passed unanimously. Now I will entertain a motion to pass this fund as amended.
Chair,
Councilor
before
Freeman.
Kathy Clark has her hand up, so I don't know if she wants to talk. I mean,
No, she just forgets to put her hand down. Go ahead.
okay, thank you. So I move that the Budget Committee adopt the Community Center Fund as amended on line 32.
J.D. Gillis.
J.D. Gillis, second. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Community Center Fund as amended. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. It is 7:29. Does everyone want to take a 10-minute break? Or do you want to push through? Break? I'm seeing break. What, you guys raise your hands if you want to break, because I can't look at all. Just raise your hands if you want to break, please. Well, it's like 2 people, 3 people. Oh.
Can we do 5 minutes?
5 minutes, okay. Take 5. We'll be back at 7:35. Thank you. Is everybody back? We're missing a couple of people here.
Mayor's on her way back.
Okay, thank you. And is that the only person we're missing? Because I can't see. Well, let me look.
Senator's on his way back to his office also.
Okay, thank you. Here she comes. Here we go. Perfect. Thank you, guys. It was a quick 5-minute break, but I think we can plow through the rest of this now. We are back in session. Mr. Warrior will be here shortly. The next fund that we are discussing is the PEG fund, or the Public Education Government Fund. And I think that's you, Mr. Wood.
That is correct. First off, I would like to just thank Rex Robertson, Philip Wade, and David Dolly for helping put together what we're doing tonight. We're one of the, I think we're probably the only city in the state, maybe the country, that is doing what we're doing tonight by having live Spanish interpretation going out to social media. They put a lot of time and effort into this, and I'm very happy with the end result that we have, and I'm very thankful for the work that they put into this. This is the fund that pays their fees. We receive a percentage off of Comcast bills for all of the people within the city. We turn around and use that money to pay for production fees, and also equipment, hardware to keep this going. They do an excellent job. They're very efficient and wise stewards of the resources that they have, and I'm glad they're on our side. So this is the fund that covers their expenses. And with that, if there's any questions.
Yes, Mr. Wood, I do have a question. With this new thing that we're doing this and Facebook Live, I would like to know the cost associated with putting all of our city council meetings on Facebook Live. And if possible to do something like that, I would like to take away camera time from a couple of our committees that we have a hard time hearing, and because I think we need to focus on city council and how we can reach everyone. So do you have that figure?
I don't have it right now, but that's in the works. We'll have to bring that to the budget hearing in June, and we can use that as a discussion. It's still an ongoing process. We're looking at how to refine it to make it a little more elegant, easier to use. So it's an ongoing process, but I agree with you. If this is something that we can continue on, I think it makes some great inroads into our community.
Okay, thank you. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to alert everyone, this particular fund is sort of under review at the moment by Comcast. We're currently going through our franchise discussions with them, a renegotiation, and they have always had some concern about the fact that we fund production costs with PEG funds. And so it is possible in the future that we may lose PEG funds for these purposes. I just wanted to make everybody aware of that. Unfortunately, I think that we do an excellent job of doing exactly what the government always intended PEG funds to be used for. And so it is unfortunate that that they don't like how we're spending the funding. So anyway, just want you to know that in advance, and there may be a time in the future when I have to come to you and say that Comcast is no longer paying us PEG funds.
Okay, thank you, City Manager. Councilor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo your comments earlier. And the other thing that I'm so appreciative is every time we have a Facebook Live event, whether it's City Council, the budget, Coffee with Kathy, coffee with the mayor, we're getting whom we are reaching, how many people in our community that we're reaching that would not come into our council chambers. We do not know from Channel 23 how many people are watching. And so I am thoroughly impressed by how many people we are reaching. Eternally grateful that we are having this translated as we are speaking now for our Latino population and in Spanish, and getting another segment of our community involved. I'm looking forward to the cost of Facebook Live and really tracking, I hope between now and, when we come back in June for final budget approval, to really how many people we have reached over this short amount of time. And especially during this COVID crisis, when so many people are staying at home to stay safe, it is amazing to see the outreach. And so I applaud the city staff for making this work, and our K23 team, which has been praised, and all of us for having to learn how to use Zoom really effectively. And I think it really shows in the comments that we're receiving, and an additional participation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Freeman. City Manager, did you have another follow-up question?
Not a question, just a comment. I will mention that learning how to do this was a steep learning curve for us, for a lot of reasons. Lots of private businesses have gotten into distance learning, a decade or more ago. State government has done a better job of it than we have, because they have committees made up of people from all across the state, and so it made fiscal sense for them to get into it. City governments have been late to the party, primarily because most of our customers are within just a couple of miles of us, but also because state laws have sort of prevented us from having meetings like this in the context of public access. So the governor has actually had to allow these kinds of meetings to count as public meetings because of this crisis. So I'm hoping that as COVID-19 goes away, that some of the allowances that we have been given by the governor stay in place, because this has been a really effective and really efficient way for us to have public outreach and these meetings. I will mention that at last night's budget meeting, we had about 900 people in and out of that meeting watching it, including about 50 who watched on our Spanish channel. So, and just the thought of 50 Spanish-speaking residents watching a budget meeting is, it's hard for me to believe that 50 people speaking any language would watch our budget meetings, but I just thought that was fantastic. So I think we're doing a great job.
Thank you, City Manager. I think we're doing a great job also. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Council President Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Keizer Budget Committee adopt the PEG Fund, which is the Public Education Government Fund, as presented.
This is Mayor Clark. I will second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the Public Education Government Fund as presented. Discussion. City Manager, your hand is raised. Oh, never mind. Okay, it's down. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that fund passes unanimously also. That takes us to the housing rehabilitation on page 152. Mr. Wood.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the next two funds together. My answer is basically the same for each of them. Both of these funds are based off of grant money that we've received in the past, that we as the city have turned around and given out zero interest loans for specific purposes. The Housing Rehab Fund was to do low-income housing rehab type of projects. Currently, there's 23 loans outstanding, totaling $271,597. For the Energy Efficiency Loan Fund, we have 17 loans outstanding for $83,431. As we look at these into the future, the policy decision is when we receive approximately 50% of the funds back, we would open up the programs again and start doing some additional loans back out to the community. With that, if there's any questions.
Okay, and we need to still do each one of these funds separately, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wood on either one of these two funds?
Madam Chair, I couldn't type fast enough to get my question.
That's okay. That's okay.
But so my question is I believe these are federal funds. And does there ever come a point in time, I know with some federal funds, if they're recycled so many times, I'll just say if they're recycled 5 times, they become defederalized. And so will these funds ever become defederalized? And then is there a way to partner with other agencies in the community that also have some housing rehab funds and also energy efficient dollars? I know Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency receive state funding for energy assistance and weatherization loans. And so I'm just wondering, how we partner that we can utilize these funds to layer with other homeowners to really help them meet the needs within their housing needs that they have within the community. Thank you.
And I think Mr. Brown was going to respond to part of that question.
Yeah, we actually just asked this question in some dialogue we're having on the changes in the home funds program. And Shannon can chime in here too, but we keep asking the questions if they can be defederalized so that they can be used for the same purpose, but without going through that process. We never, and the answer we got was vague at best, because nobody likes to know it. I've often wondered what would happen if we just simply said, we have cycled these funds at least twice completely, and every year they get chewed up with more administration costs. I wonder what would happen if we just said, thanks, have a nice day, but we've asked the question several times and have not gotten a definitive answer. As far as joining with another, we have not explored that, and I can't. Obviously, in my short time status, I won't have much impact on it, but I think that's worth something to explore.
Mr. Wood, did you have a follow-up to that?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Did that answer your question, Councilor Freeman?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I am happy to find whom at Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency that administers these funds from a state perspective and partner. So I'm happy to do some outreach on my end for that.
That'd be great. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion independently of each other, please, for the energy efficient housing and energy efficient.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Freeman.
I move that the Keizer Budget Committee approve as presented the Housing Rehabilitation Fund.
Okay, it's been seconded by Kathy Clark, Mayor Clark. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Housing Rehabilitation Fund as presented. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously, and that takes us to an entertaining motion for the energy efficiency loans.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
I move that the Keizer Budget Committee adopt the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Freeman, seconded by Mr. Dial, that we approve the energy efficiency loan as presented. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, hearing none, that motion passes unanimously. That brings us to Keizer Station LID. Mr. Wood.
The final fund that we're considering tonight is the Keizer Station LID fund. This was established when Keizer Station was constructed. We paid for all of the infrastructure costs out there, and then we turned around and assessed the specific owners of the property. This is the fund where we collect those assessments and turn around and use those proceeds to pay off the debt associated with the construction that we did. And at this point, there is 25 properties out there that have assessments, and all of them are current on their assessment payments. So this one, we just keep collecting the assessments and turning around and making the payments. We're scheduled to have this debt paid off. We're required to have it paid off in June 2031. We will likely have it paid off several years before that, as we typically make principal payments throughout the years to try to lower our interest cost. And with that, if there's any questions.
We have any questions for Mr. Wood on this fund? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I move that the Keizer Budget Committee adopt the Keizer Station LID Fund as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Freeman, seconded by Councilor Kohler, that we approve the Keizer Station LID fund as presented. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Guess what that brings us to? So that brings us to 5A, which is approving the 2021 budget. And this is Mr. Johnson, this is as amended because we amended that one, or is that correct? Okay, so Mr. Dial, you're going to do number one, and it's going to be as amended, okay?
Madam
So
Chair,
go ahead.
I make a motion that we approve the City of Keizer budget for fiscal year 2020-2021 as amended by the Budget Committee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And was that JD?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve, or that we pass, we approve the City of Keizer budget for fiscal year 2020-2021 as amended by the Budget Committee. Discussion.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Freeman.
So I guess this is a clarity question, and I asked Tim before. So we have items in our long-range plan that we talked about, and I know we have carry forward dollars. At what point will we be talking about those and potentially using some of those funds to look at some of these items that are on the long-range planning list?
Unfortunately, the majority of these items that we're looking at have a significant general fund impact. So at this point, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that we add these additional items in. I think that we need to take a look at them again. They're on page 172 of your budget document. And this is the list that we had presented at the Long Range Planning Committee. Between then and now, there haven't been any significant changes. However, I agree with you as we go through time and we can start seeing where the general fund revenues start to come in at. We'll probably be coming back to the City Council and saying, hey, we have excess dollars. This is the priority list that we had originally established. Is this in alignment with the direction that you're wishing to head? So I would anticipate that would be an ongoing conversation over the next year. But at this point, I would not recommend adding any of these without finding some other dollars to take out.
Can I have a follow-up, please?
Yes, go ahead.
So Tim, so I guess my question is I know this comes to council who ultimately has the decision, but is that something that we can or should seek the input of the budget committee as well, as they were part of our long range planning session? And I always appreciate input from, you know, our citizens in the budget committee. So I'm just, I guess, more maybe asking a process question. And so, and we can approve the motion and have that conversation later too.
I would definitely say if there's things on the list like move around as far as priorities go, we can do that as kind of an advisory, and when the time comes, we can definitely come back. But I would definitely appreciate as much feedback as possible. So that would help us to set the priorities if and when we identify dollars.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Thank you. And I think the idea of having a conversation once this motion is passed about an advisory from the long range, from the budget committee as to what some priorities are for opportunities that do arise to be able to meet some of those needs that we identified. In addition, a short-term council goal is on staffing and resources, and we will be following up on the work session we did, as well as the work that we did on the long range planning task force to continue to pursue refining those needs and then finding the dollars an appropriate way to meet those needs. So I appreciate Council President Freeman's focus on that, and I completely concur that we need to keep this front and center moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there any other discussion before the vote? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Dial, on your second motion, please.
Chair, I would recommend we pass a motion to impose full permanent tax rate of 2.0838 per $1,000 of assessed value onto the tax rolls of the City of Keizer for fiscal year 2020-2021. Again, that's $2.0838 per $1,000 assessed.
Kim Freeman, second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we impose the full permanent tax rate of $2.08 and 38 milliseconds. I don't know what you do, but 2.0838 per 1,000 of assessed value on the tax rolls of the City of Keizer for fiscal year 2020-2021. Discussion. City Manager, let us know that this is the lowest one in the state. Could you just kind of tell us that?
I can't say that it is the lowest one in the state. There are some very small cities that have no services, but of any city close to our size, it is not just the lowest, but by 30% or more.
Thank you. And I want to say that the city staff does a great job in staying within our means and balancing this budget. So again, I appreciate it. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. That goes us to question number 6, which is questions and closing comments.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Freeman.
I'm going to be first tonight. So this is my last budget meeting as a counselor. And it's one of the first ones that was not on my birthday for the last 8 years. So I thank everyone for that. I almost didn't know what to do on my birthday because I had a night to myself. So thank you. And I just, again, want to thank the staff for their impeccable work. The budget document over this last 8 years has been extraordinary as far as answering most of our questions, which I really, really appreciate. You explain things when, you know, the amounts increase or decrease. And so it has really been a learning document for all of us. And I just appreciate the committee's work. We have some new members this year, and you were pretty quiet. And I remember when I sat on the budget committee prior to being on council, it took me my third year before I actually felt comfortable with the budget document. So I just encourage you to review the document, ask Tim any questions, ask the counselors questions. We're here for you, but Tim is a wealth of knowledge along with our city manager, Chris. And keep going and keep volunteering. So again, I just appreciate everyone's time and appreciate that this will be my last budget hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Freeman. Jonathan.
I just wanted to second Councilor Freeman's comments to Tim and Chris. Thank you very much. This is easy. You guys make this easy, and the fact that we got this done in less than 4.5 hours is 2 nights is a testament to you guys' work. I also wanted to, since the mayor asked about it, I also wanted to just put a check mark in the box for the HRIS software, especially as we manage our way through what is only going to be a more complicated human resources landscape as we come out of this COVID crisis. I would much rather see us invest in software, since you don't have to pay PERS and health insurance on a piece of software. So if that's that would be on that. I know you have that listed as number 1 on the list of high priorities, and I hope that's in order, because I would definitely put it there. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anybody else? I guess I'll go last then. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to do a quick follow-up to our list of items for future consideration. Really, the priority list that I am going on, I don't think has changed from the long-range planning meeting. Number 1 priority for me is to maintain the services that we have, to making sure as much as possible we can keep departments whole, keep staffing going. To me, that's the number 1 priority. Second to that is identifying areas that we can leverage. HRIS system is a perfect example of that. Rather than adding additional personnel in HR, hopefully we can add this and it will leverage us for the next however many years. We have several other software items in there that I believe we could do the same type of thing as. So those will be the kind of things that we're looking to take advantage, and coming back to the city council, maybe even at the budget hearing time, to say, hey, these things have popped up. We want to take advantage of this so that we can leverage the resources that we have. And so that's really the priority system that I have in place. And it's really going to be a kind of a group effort as we come to terms with the resources that we have and how we can use those to the best of our ability for the city. So that's my take on items to consider for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also wanted to thank Kim Freeman for her time on City Council and the Budget Committee. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. I want to thank this committee. My life is government. That's what I went to school for. I watched my dad do it. I was sort of raised into it. And I think it's a beautiful thing when a group of people can come together and decide for ourselves how to best serve our community. And, I'm blessed with an amazing staff. We have great folks out in the field helping people every day. It's just an amazing place to work and a great group of people that I get to serve with. So thank you all very much for your time. You don't have to do this. Nobody's paying you to do this. But your advice and your counsel is appreciated. So thank you very much. And Madam Chair, you did an excellent job this year.
Thank you, Mr. Epley. And with that, I will also echo Councilor Freeman. This is my last year also on budget. And I learned so much about government over the last 8 years, and saw how we grew as a city, but not only that, but how city staff put together, like Councilor Freeman said, this impeccable budget that actually makes our job easy. So I again, thank you staff for a great job and for making our job easy also. So I will miss all of you, but I know that you will continue to do a great job for the city of Keizer, and I'll always be watching. So thank you. Anybody else for the good of the order tonight? Well, with that, we are adjourned, and thank you for your time the last 2 evenings.